everybody, this is Detroit Bob, and I'm your host for what we call the RockMine. This is the premiere episode on YouTube, and what we're going to talk about is collecting 45 RPM records. Now you remember these are the ones with the large hole, and not your 33s, not your 78s that your grandpa had, but these are very collectible now, and we're going to get into how to collect them. But I really want to dig into this box that I just found at the thrift store over the weekend, and this is just full of records. This is exactly the way I found it. We're going to go through them, we're going to categorize them, I'll show you how to get on Discogs, and this will be a regular reoccurring series that you can tune into and really get you into collecting these really cool gems of rock and roll, soul, blues, and jazz. So stick with me, we'll get started. All right, let's get into this box and see what we have. Okay, so when I found this box, it wasn't even displayed. I didn't even see it all for $60. See, on the back there was something else, 45. So okay, $1 each. And then he says something like, well, I'll give you those for 5 for $1. And I'm like, okay, now we're in business.
Hey, I'm going to tell you what we're looking for when we look at a 45. So this is an old 45, capital sleeve, capital label, stereo, the Bob Seger System. So you could pick one artist as a jump off point to start your collection. I sort of picked Bob Seger, and I'll explain why in a minute. But look at all the information you have here. You got Noah, the title of the song. You have Bob Seger, the writer. You have the name of the band, the Bob Seger System. And you have that it's stereo. You have the capital logo and label. You have something about publishing with some numbers. And you have the number of the release itself and who it's produced by, Hideout Productions. There's also a lot of information in this little dead wax area. If you look down here in these numbers, you can see sometimes where it's even pressed at. You'll see the logos. So the information that you get off of this label, I'm going to enter into Discogs, and it's going to tell me exactly what this is. There's also a flip side. Lenny Johnson. Now this was written by Don Honecker. Interesting. I'm not familiar with the song, but I'm sure Seger covered it. Sometimes you got a great flip side. Look at the original capital label that it came in, and you can see the logo there again. So I'm pretty sure this was sold together. Sometimes they get replaced or mixed up. Hey, this is Detroit Bob. Speaking of vaults, you have to have a room, and this is the RockMine laboratory where I break everything down. I can lock the door, nobody can get in here. I can get halfway through a project, I can stop and have lunch. But what we're going to do is break down this big box of 45 RPM records that I found and enter them into Discogs, which is your online database for all things vinyl. That is a great tool because it helps you keep your records sorted by year, by date, by acquisition, by number, by label, by artist, by name, and it'll also give you values. It'll also give you who wants it, how many want it, and little tidbits about the artist and record label that you're going to want to know if you're going to be a serious collector. Detroit Bob back at you. I'm not going to drag you through every record in this box, but when I go through these boxes, I get lost in time, and it took me well over an hour to just go through this one box. That's not including entering each record individually into Discogs, which is a digital storage basically of your collection. I remember going back when I was a kid, and my dad used to bring home rolls of pennies from the lunch counter at school where he was a teacher. And I'd look through those pennies for hours trying to find a Wheatie, which was an older copper penny. And I collected them. I remember I was so happy when I found a 1916 Wheatie after searching for hours. And after a while, I had a really decent collection of pennies. And I went on and I started to collect old bottles. Then I'd sell them to the antique lady for 25 cents. And I got myself a pretty good bottle collection after a while. One day I went into the antique store and sell one of my bottles for sale for $5. So that made me start to think that one man's trash is another man's treasure, but things have value, and things that are nostalgic have a lot of value. I went on to beer cans, to bottles, to jars, and then vinyl records when I was a kid. Cassette tapes, all the way through college. I was playing and collecting vinyl and dropping it to cassette, and vice versa. And then one day, vinyl just died, and without realizing it, by going over to CD, in a way I was entering this digital dystopia that we all live in. So here I am again, and it's really sort of almost like therapy, just sitting here going through these records one by one, sort of as an armchair vinyl archaeologist, looking at bands and records and labels and remembering all these great memories and discovering new artists and new things I never knew about before. So in a way, we're all looking for something. The search and the hunt continues, and you can look at that on a practical level or on a much higher level, but it's sort of woven into our human constitution. And I think ultimately I want to find the ultimate 45, which is Beatles and Vee-Jay, a record label based out of Gary, Indiana, and they misspelt the name of the band with 2 T's. So that's our holy grail, and sometime in this journey I hope to find it.
Hey, Detroit Bob, back at you. Got through the box. It was a monumental task. We went through, we categorized everything, we sleeved everything, and we entered everything into Discogs. So we should have a value for you. And we'll explain a little bit what that means and how you can do the same. But here we go. It took a while. This was a monumental task, like I said. And let's go through it together, and I'll give you the results. All right, Detroit Bob, back at you. We talked about what we found, a box full of records. We went through it. I told you what I look for in a record. And now we're going to sort of sum everything up. So how did we do on our investment? Well, we're done with the box. I told you that. We can get rid of that. But let's go through the records and see what we found. Okay, this is it. That clean look is what we're looking for. Most of these have been sleeved. I ran out of sleeves, so I got those on back order. This started out as a cardboard box full of piled up records, and we've gone through them. I think each of these boxes holds approximately 80 to 100 records. I think we have a little over 300 records here. The beauty of it is we started out for $20, and I explained how I negotiated that price, and the final median value based on a Discogs estimation of sales was $1,511. So that was a good return on investment. Now you might say, who cares about the money? Well, there's emotional value, but there's also how much people want these records. And if you can track that, that's a reality that you just can't deny. So people are going to buy and sell records. They are a commodity. Some people collect coins, some people collect records. You may love a record
that's worth 75 cents, you may never listen to a record that's worth $100. So I think we did pretty good. Definitely a great collection here. I'm going to go ahead and sleeve the rest of them, but let's get into what our gem of the week is, and we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, thanks for sticking with me. This is episode 1 of RockMine, the truly cool Detroit rock and roll, blues, jazz, soul, 45 RPM record vault for your listening pleasure. It's been great. I told you every week I'm going to have a gem of the week, and this ended up being my gem of the week by Tommy Duncan. It's got Dance, Dance, Dance on the one side, and Let's Try It Over Again on the other. It's on Falu Records. Who would have known? An obscure label out of New York City, 1276th Avenue, New York, New York, linked to Fats Lewis. So the FA for Fats and the LEW for Lewis, and then just throw an exclamation point on there. So this label only lasted about a year or two, and this ends up being a $21 record. It's scratched. It's in probably good plus condition, maybe even good, but I played it and it sounds great. So don't let your purist instincts interfere with the love of a great sounding record. So here it is, the gem of the week. Now stay with us, because next week we're going to the Mississippi River. I'm calling it Highway 61 Revisited, and we're going to have a great episode. We found some really cool stuff down there by the Rock Island line, and it's going to be a great show. So episode 2 coming up, Highway 61 Revisited. You're going to want to be here. It'll be out next week, so stay tuned. RockMine. This is Detroit Bob saying goodbye.